You have to make yourself more confident by facing down your fears. And most of us fear, more than anything, humiliation. That's why school stays with us so long. My fear was of standing in front of people, and asking them to listen to me. I'm fascinated by charisma and charm. Because I kind of think some people have it, some people learn it, but I think more people are given that by their audience.
So, welcome to another episode. This is slightly different. Normally, I'm out and about in people's workplaces, wherever it may be. Today, though, I'm joined here on the sofa by David. Welcome, David.
Thank you. You're not allowed in my workplace.
No, exactly. I'm banned. So here we are. But this brings me on to my first question, I suppose. So I was thinking actually how best to introduce you, and there's always a challenge with the people that I'm meeting. But it's very, very hard to really describe you in terms of the work that you do. Yes, exactly. So how would you go about?
It can be a bit of a conversation stopper. When people like to go, at parties, what do you do? That dreadful question that everybody feels polite they have to do. And I can, depending on how much I like or think I'm going to like the person, I might go, I work in prison. And that might stop them dead there. Or they get very annoyingly curious about it. But I do work a lot in prisons. I am a freelancer, so I am my own boss. And essentially what my job is to do is to engage people in creative arts. And that can mean things like getting people to write stories, to get them to write journals, get them to read more books, to discuss books, to engage them in artwork, creating books. I run lots of events. I run probably, I think it is the world's only literary festival. So it's about books of kind. But it runs in a prison. And I work with a committee of serving prisoners, and we both decide who comes to the prison, what kind of events we put on, and how they should be run.
Right. So books is your passion.
Books
really.
are big. Books are big. Not everybody is into books, strangely enough.
Have you always been into books?
Always.
Right.
But I'm very aware that not everybody is. Essentially, I grew up on comics anyway. I mean, I learned to read with comics. That's kind of my introduction. And I work a lot with graphic novelists and comic book artists as well, which engages a lot of other people who wouldn't be interested in books. But essentially, yes, I admit it, I love books. So much...
So do I, by the way. So you're in good company. Yeah.
But I realise that not everybody does, for various reasons. Okay. I mean, I can remember school, a long time ago. But... you were supposed to like the books from the school library. And I did a lot of the time, But there were also always books that teachers disapproved of because they had lots of sex and drugs and violence in them that would go under and around. And people who wouldn't read other books would read those because they didn't feel like books. And so there were always books in an underground economy.
Right.
So, as long as I'm aware of those books and I have a handle on them, I can introduce people to other books as well. But by showing that I'm willing to read their preference for books, they will then give me tolerance to read my preference for books.
Okay.
That's fair. I never say, this is a great book, you must read it. That's guaranteed to put anybody off. I don't read books that people tell me to read. I have to find a way in via people's interest and gain their trust. And so now the guys in that prison will just say, David knows what he's doing most of the time. Occasionally I'll put a book in and I'll go like, that was rubbish. Sometimes they'll choose a book for me and say, you have to read this. I'll go, actually, that's pretty good. They made me read Hustle Smarter, Hustle Harder, 50 Cent. Self-help book.
Right.
it's pretty good actually.
Mm.
I thought it was well presented, you know. And some of the books that I recommend, they have a love-hate relationship, you know, and it's an interesting process because, you know, they might hate the book at first, and then actually when they've read it, they will tell me 2 or 3 months later, actually that was good, you know. But
It's interesting because I've always loved reading. And when I was a child, I mean, at first school, I think I pretty much did every single book off the shelf. We sort of ran out of books. And then I remember I got to GCSE, so the first of the 2 years of GCSE. I don't think I picked up a book out of choice from the age of, it would have been 14 through to finishing A-levels. I did A-level English literature until I was 18. That 4 years, obviously I read because you have set text. And you have to, but I didn't ever pick up a book out of choice. And I remember finishing A-levels, and that summer I started reading again. And it was just, I mean, normally it's classic sort of literature. I mean, I remember going through Lord of the Rings again and Dickens and all this sort of stuff. There's no way I would have picked up that during, you know, whilst we were in that thing of having to dissect everything and analyse things and write an answer that has to be a certain type of, it's not like you can just write whatever you want. I found that really, really difficult.
this is why I didn't do English lit.
Right.
It kills a love of books.
Yes.
It's very common, that experience,
Right.
in that a lot of people do not read between those ages, particularly you're 14 upwards, you're doing other stuff as well.
Well, there's that, yeah.
You know, now you've got phones. But I think it is about trying to find what you want from books. You know, and I think that can be quite a harder thing. To me, a reader is not necessarily somebody who can read. It's somebody who's found what they like to read and they know how to get it.
Right.
That's the difference.
So how do you, I mean, this may be too broad a question, but in a prison, if you're encountering people there who are just very, very reluctant to read, they're just not interested, how do you how do you sell the benefits of a book?
Same reason to sell anything. Rule number 1 for selling is gain the trust of the person.
Right.
You know, when you have their trust, it doesn't really matter what you're trying to sell them.
Right.
They'll sort of like believe you enough to try it. Whether I'm selling the idea of the gym, the food, the library, or whatever, you know?
Yeah.
And they may not buy into the idea that all reading is great. More likely, they'll say, Dave likes the cartel books. He's brought me the cartel books. I'll read those.
Right.
Because they're dodgy. Yeah. And so, you know, they'll get in that way.
Right.
But you're trying to make a connection with people. It is that, you know, so they'll believe that you've listened to them and you're not just a little dot on somebody's paper in that I've got 4 prisoners to read 4 books. Yeah. Who cares, you know?
Yeah.
I only really care about that connection that's genuine with people.
Yeah.
You know, you can order people to do anything. I mean, you can. Particularly in prison, I mean, I can say, you all have to read this book or otherwise you're all going down the sec, the punishment block.
Yeah.
Half of them wouldn't do anyway, but what does it matter?
Yeah,
You know, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
You know, I need people to do it freely of their own volition. They're all adults.
Yeah.
I don't treat them like children and tell them. I don't give them homework. You know, and I have to lead or get them to believe in me by I will do everything I ask them to do.
Right. With so much of his life dominated by his love for books and reading, I asked David about his childhood growing up on a farm in North Yorkshire. Whilst his passion goes back to his early years, not everything was as straightforward for him at school.
I went to a school called Huntington Comprehensive School. I hope you're all listening now. Which is in the city of York, because I'm from Yorkshire.
Okay, right.
Yeah, I come from a farming family. All my family are in farming.
Okay.
All of them. You know, the only person who went to university went to do, I don't know, pig feed degree. Yeah.
Okay.
Bless
Right.
her, my cousin. So you know, you're expected to do farming, and that was okay at primary school. Because primary school, I had a tiny primary school. We had probably no more than 30, 35 people in the entire school.
Right.
There was juniors, 8 or 9 of us, infants, 15, 20 or whatever there was.
So small rural school.
I mean, literally.
And this is, what era are we talking now?
We're talking the early 70s.
Okay.
So I went to secondary school in 78.
Right,
yeah.
okay.
Okay. But, primary school, all the kids came from farming backgrounds.
Yeah.
Okay. So I go from a school of approximately 30, where I'm probably related to nearly everybody in that school.
Right.
It's kind of close families.
Okay.
And I go to a school of 1,500.
Right.
Which has got more than 2 rooms. It has buildings with it's got floors.
Right.
We go on a bus. They got playing fields. They got multiple teams. When we play football, everybody just had to play football because they weren't a team. So I found it terrifying for the size, confusing. Yeah, and nobody helps you. And you also, that safety net of coming from a background where everybody came from a similar background has gone because hardly anybody does farming.
Right.
So I was in with kids whose parents were bricklayers, carpenters, working down all the big factories in York, the chocolate factories, all of this,
And you found that quite a hard sort of transition.
Yeah, I found it all just, I couldn't see a point of any of it.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, looking back, you think, well, why? Obviously, education. There's a point. I couldn't, because it was just, it felt like you were just going to the next bit of paper. It was all leading to these exams, which I didn't know why you would do the exams anyway. Also, you come into a point in the early 80s when there's a big recession on. I can still remember my headmaster in our leaving assembly saying to us, well, because of the Tory government, none of you will get jobs because the industries have gone,
Oh, really?
Yeah, okay. Mr. Brown, thank you, Mr. Brown.
That's an uplifting message.
It was. He was right. I mean, there was no job.
Yeah.
It was. It's a dreadful recession,
Yeah.
So at 15, I did my exams, but I wasn't 16 until the late summer. Again, summer babies. We're a year younger than everybody else, more or less.
Did you at that point? Did you have any sort of aspiration in terms of what that would be, or you just wanted work?
Careers advice is man with a large A4 file with plastic sheets, lots of papers in, who came in and said, "What does your dad do?" He said he's a farmer. He went, "Oh, well, you'll do that, won't you?" He says, "No, I've had that discussion. We both agreed. Me and Dad agreed. I don't want to do farming. He didn't want me to do farming, particularly."
Well, that's quite telling.
So it was like, oh well, And I remember I did right back then. The only thing I could think of to do with books was journalism, because that was the only paid work I thought writers ever did.
Yeah.
And my teacher said, "Well, you can't do that because you'd need 4 O levels, and you're only down to get." Actually, I was down to get at least 3. I think I got 1. That's great, 1 in the end. Because I'd given up by that point.
Right.
So they said, "Well, you can't be a journalist." So I assumed they were right.
Okay. Right.
Don't listen to adults. So off I go anyway to YTS, which is in this old house in York, and it's a clever idea in some ways, in that you had a load of dysfunctional young people, and you would teach them the trades by doing plastering, do bricklaying, do plumbing, and you had lots of people who'd been turned out of work by the recession teaching us.
Yeah.
And I learnt plumbing.
So the idea being that one of the you'd find one of them interesting enough to then be able to
you take an apprenticeship kind of thing.
But you get to try a few. And,
yeah. I mean, a lot of the time, people were just using the paint cupboard as a glue sniffing room.
Right.
You'd open the paint cupboard and 2 skinners would fall out.
Right.
But I learned plumbing. I had a fabulous guy called John Early who loved books.
Right.
And we would swap books, because we both loved a little bit of sci-fi, science fiction. I love all kinds of books, but at that point, I got into science fiction and we were swapping books, so that was a real thing. And he was the person that probably transformed me more than anybody else, I think, because I came from a very quiet family. North Yorkshire, farming. You don't talk very much.
Right.
You literally, nothing to say, no chit-chat. If something hasn't died, there's nothing worth saying about it, really, is there? you know, cold outside, that's it.
Yeah.
And John, though, he would just torture me and make me talk.
Right.
And make me, he taught me how to sort of like be funny.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, he's quite transformed me. You know, I owe everything to that. The 6, 7, or 8 months that I was.
So how old are you at this point?
I'm 16.
Right. Okay.
I had my first motorcycle. I got to go to every day at this YTS scheme. Okay. Various things. I mean, I'm 16. Various things happen, but I get offered a job doing. Well, the idea is supposed to be doing plumbing, but actually it was building swimming pools.
Right. Okay.
For very posh people. And actually, I did very little plumbing. I did an awful lot of labouring.
Right.
It was rubbish. And the swimming pools leaked.
Right.
So I didn't even really learn to anything.
That wasn't a
anything
reflection on your plumbing skills, was it?
No,
Or just-
no, it was a reflection on the builders. You know,
Okay,
all
right.
I was doing was what I'd and again, it was one of those things where actually I'm not very good just being told what to do.
Right.
You know, and the building sites are particularly bad at this, actually. Like, some people will take young people under their wing and teach them skills. Some people will just shout at them until they learn what it is to do. Not always a good way of teaching people.
Following the YTS scheme, David had a succession of jobs, including a stint as a forklift truck driver, where once again his love of reading shaped his work.
Fabulous. John Smith's Brewery. First job was putting empty crates of beer onto a conveyor belt. Now, this is 1985 probably. Everybody smoked. I mean, everybody smoked.
Yeah.
You know, they didn't smoke, there's something wrong with you. I started smoking only to get cigarette breaks.
Right.
I started smoking at 17,
Right.
you know, just to get cigarette breaks.
Yeah.
So anybody else got them. I think, well, this is wrong, you know. So, not the great idea. But, you know, so you're smoking, you got 2 free pints every day.
Oh, okay.
You know, health and safety. I mean, you know. But putting crates, it's got its limits. So I learnt to drive a forklift truck. I still got my 2 free pints. I learnt to drive a forklift truck, which actually was
But
pretty
you had to drink
good.
them after you'd finished your day's driving?
No, you drank by lunchtime.
Oh, okay. Fair enough.
Insane. The world was insane. But I did like forklift truck driving. It was because the interesting thing was, again, you know, the job, rather than working all the time, you know, and there were dodges. So you would jam the conveyor belt just to have a cigarette break.
Right.
And it's a dodge. You put too many things on, it would jam. Great, yeah, 10 minutes, have a cigarette break. Forklift truck driving, you were only required to work when a truck came in to be loaded or offloaded.
Right.
They weren't always. You said sometimes like an hour in between. And I would just sit and read on my forklift truck, you know. At that point, I was into horror novels. And one of their foremen was also into horror novels. And we'd swap horror novels. And he would say, David, the thing is, I can't have you sat on your forklift truck just reading. It looks like you're not working. I said, but they're all not working. I said, but they're talking and standing with brooms, but you're deliberately, you know, it's like an insult to the company. You're just flaunting the fact you're not working. He says, what you need to do, David, is go and park your forklift truck in between these huge stacks of beer crates. Nobody can see you there. I can't see you. Problem solved.
Right.
That's what I did.
Eventually, after a succession of roles and periods of travel both in the UK and Europe, David made his way down to London, where he would encounter a very different type of occupation.
So, but I meet a young lady, and she's an artist, and she's madly creative, and, you know, just can draw things that look like what you imagined. I mean, she could do anything. I mean, I just insanely mad about people who can do that kind of thing. So, you know, and her brothers could play guitars, and they play it properly. You know, it's amazing. Anyway, they were all going to London. So, you know, and when you're in love with somebody, you just basically tag along, you follow them, you know. So I go to London, not knowing what I'm going to do, but I know the one job that might be perfect for me in London is a motorcycle dispatch rider. That was big in the 80s.
Right.
No internet, there was no email. Basically, the fastest way of getting a letter from one side of London to the other side of London is by motorcycle.
Right. Okay.
I love motorcycles. I've always had a motorcycle since I was 16. I'm 58 now. I still have a motorcycle.
Right.
And so therefore I thought, well, I could do this. I didn't do it straight away. I went back to forklift truck diving and got laid off after about 3 months because the paint factory folded, and they gave me a payoff. I had about 400 quid, I think it was, and I bought a motorcycle.
Right.
And now, problem was, I can ride bikes, no problem. I'm a northerner. I do not know London at all.
Yeah, well, that's...
And you're expected to know like the back of your hand. You've got an A to Z printed map, and you've got to work out. And let's say go to the West End. I didn't know where the West End was. I mean, I can do a compass. West End, what does it mean? It doesn't mean anything.
That's quite an intimidating thing. I spent a year living in London.
It took me it took me probably a good 6 or 9 months to get a good working knowledge of London. And then I was called in, so I did a couple of jobs. Again, you're just a freelance. You get paid literally per mile, you do. Every job is, you get paid per job. But you was on what felt like quite good money. It's all cash in hand. You literally just paid cash. And the guy who runs the company called me and says, like, David, you're all right. You're reliable. You're polite with the clients, but you are a bit slow. So you need to move faster between point A to point B. And I'm thinking, well, I'm already going pretty fast. He says, go out with, I don't know, Steve. Follow Steve through the traffic. You'll see how fast he moves. He's the top rider. And he's on a bike that's probably not actually as fast as mine, but, So, okay, he grins at me and we go out, and I follow him through traffic. And it's insanity.
Right.
It is, every rule is broken. There's no cameras anywhere, so you can break all rules. As long as you keep an eye out for blue lights, you're okay. But it was like, weaving through traffic. Every red light will be jumped.
Right.
You'll go on pavements. You will do everything. You are pretty safe, but it's not. Your adrenaline is massive.
Right.
And
in a good way or a bad way? Or
well, at the time, adrenaline is adrenaline.
Yeah.
You feel like it's fabulous. I mean, you're so wired.
Yeah.
So I learned that the only way to be fast enough was to ignore all rules. Okay. And then I was fast enough. And I got through all my time dispatch riding with no points on my license.
Oh, well done.
And only a few breakages of bones.
Right.
I have plastic teeth here. I've got a few bits of metal in me. But it's an insane time, but you really felt at the centre of London. You were part of that buzz of London. And London was the opposite of the recession up north. London was booming. It was a time everybody was being involved. You would stop people, dispatch riders would stop each other and go like, how much you earned so far today? And it would be like, all you cared about was the money. It was just money. You almost forgot that actually you were doing the thing that you love most, ride motorcycles. But it's a job for a young man. I mean, I was young. I was in my early 20s. So, your peak, you bounce. When you hit the road, and you do hit the road quite a few times, you bounce and you get back up again.
Yeah.
Now, years later, my knees ache in the wet weather because there are bits of bone floating around in there. But I used to, have a smash and I just get up, pick the bike up, get on with it.
Yeah.
It's ridiculous. But I thought I need to have plan B. Okay, what do I have that I can do? I'm a pretty rubbish writer. I read a lot of books, but my writing isn't that good. I mean, my stories, I'd like to say they're works of genius, but I know they're not that good yet, at this point. I still have the idea writing would be a good thing. But I know, how do you get into that? I know nobody. So I'm riding motorcycles. I'll do motorcycle maintenance, cities and girls, because that seems logical.
Yeah.
You know, I'm already doing maintenance on my motorcycle anyway. So one day a week, I get time off one day a week to do my citizen girls. I'm actually not that good at motorcycle maintenance, despite the fact I'm riding a bike 30,000 miles every year,
Right.
every single day. I'm riding more than anybody else that I know. I'm not that good actually at working out what goes wrong with things.
Right. Okay.
You know. So I think, well, you know, what am I going to do? I had the genius idea of being a welder, because welding, that's good money. And I quite like the idea of welding. But my girlfriend, still the same girlfriend that brought me down to London, you know, she says, wow, why don't you just do an access course? You know, you've got I had one O level at this point, you know, I had one O level, I failed everything else. Do an access course, and then maybe you can do some kind of collegey degree thing, you know, because she's doing a degree in costume making and theatre and things. You know, student life didn't look too bad. But, you know, I've never done anything, so I apply to Thames Polytechnic for their access course, a year's access course, to try and get me to a point where I could do a degree. You know, at this point I'm 24. So I've had 8 years of doing various rubbishy jobs, you know,
Right.
and sort of thinking, God, do you do this for the rest of your life? Because I don't think I'm going to actually live long enough. Because motorcycle dispatch, right, you know, a lot of people don't live that long.
Right.
You know, or
One accident too far.
accident, you know, or people get crippled, you know, and you know, and also it's like I see people in their 40s, they're just exhausted, you know. I thought, oh, you know, but then what am I going to do? What am I going to do? Anyway, bless them, Thames Polytechnic wrote back and sent me the form for a degree in humanities. I went, oh, I'm terribly sorry, but you sent me the wrong form because I actually have no qualifications at all. You know, surely I need to do the access course. And I said, basically, you're a mature student because you're 24. We'll take you on, and if you're rubbish, we'll just boot you out. Which seemed fair, you know. So, from doing nothing in any form of writing apart from writing little bad short stories, and I have my punctuation is dreadful, my spelling is dreadful.
Right.
Because I never learned. You know, in the 70s, people were like, yeah, I'll be fine. And also, nobody expected them. The kids are going to be farmers. They don't need to write and read. Nobody cared.
Right.
You know, so I could do full stops, but I didn't really know what a comma, how to use a comma, and my spelling was, you know, pretty bad. So I started this degree, you know.
Right.
It's humanities. I'm studying the arts, literature, politics, philosophy. I have no idea about any of these apart from I'm quite a good reader.
Yeah.
So you don't have to be a good writer to be a good reader. You know, things that you can't spell, skate over in your head. You put the meaning out, so it's fine. So the first 6 months of the degree are just dreadful. You know, I'm getting low C's. You know, and they're being kind to me. This is my first year. You know, I said, like, David, this is just you can't write an essay, can you? I said, well, no, actually, because I haven't learned how to write an essay. So I got a book about how to write an essay.
Right.
That was the thing, and it's a very good book actually. And I thought, oh yeah, okay, paragraphs. That's the thing, an argument.
Right.
You know, but so I learned the mechanics, but the main thing was that 2/3 of the way through, you had to make a choice about modules like you did in most degrees. And I chose education because there was nothing else on the syllabus that I could choose. It all looked rubbish. Education, the politics of education. I thought it'd be all right. Tutor's this old Marxist lady. When she was dying in the world, old communist, fabulous woman. You know, they don't make them like that anymore. And, you know, we're reading about education and schools and stuff. You know, I'd chosen it. It felt not too threatening because we've all done education, right? So we already know something about that. And I'm reading this book. I think it was called Why Working Class Kids Get Working Class Jobs.
Okay.
You know, I think it's Paul Willis. I think it might be that. And there's a paragraph in it. And I mean, this is a sociological text about kids in the 60s and 70s. So it's talking about the 10, 15 years before me, really, when there was mass employment. And it talks about boys in particular, because it's mainly about boys.
Yeah.
Because who else goes to work? Boys at that time, really.
Yeah.
It's not got great expectations of ladies. Right, so it says all that time you spent in class and you messed around either at the back or in the middle. You played up to the teacher. You didn't do your homework. You found dodges to get away from school.
Yeah.
All of that is perfectly trains you for working in a warehouse like a Tadcaster brewery. Because that's what you'll be doing with the foreman. You'll be doing dodges. You'll be dodging the foreman rather than the teacher. You'll be messing around in front of your friends just like you did at school.
So it's your book in the forklift scenario. Yeah.
It is. And it's just... It was, a moment of revelation that the world is how it is, not because of some forces out of your control, but because of forces that you could understand. That there's no evil person controlling anybody, that kind of thing. But I had maneuvered myself into a position that actually set me up perfectly for a job that I would dislike.
Right.
Working in a factory thing, But school had trained me to do that. By putting an environment where some of the boys, it's nearly always the boys, mess around. They are acting out roles they will play in those warehouses and factories. We're kind of training ourselves for those roles without knowing. I find that absolutely fascinating.
Yeah.
And that's the point where my brain sort of switched on. It made me very aware, and I ended up getting a very good grade on my degree, and I was very pleased with myself, and it transformed me. I left university. I never went to any event or anything like that because I didn't want to do any of those silly things. Performance, I got my degree, it's all I cared about. I went back to dispatch writing because what else was there?
Right.
I didn't know anything else. So, we are now 93, 94, 93, I think it was. Still no internet, although it's somewhere there, in the background.
Yeah.
Computers are talking to computers, but we've heard nothing about it. Dispatch riding is still the fastest way of getting letters from A to B. Okay, so I go back to dispatch riding. So what else am I going to do? I have a bad accident. I lose 2 of my front teeth. They're plastic, and I kind of haven't, basically, there's an iron barrier on a road that is supposed to raise up.
Right. And it doesn't.
It didn't. So luckily I wasn't going that fast, but I hit it with my face. I had a helmet on, but it literally just pulled me off by my face and dropped me on my knees. So my knees actually hurt most, but it was my face that took the brunt of the damage. And so that was a tricky bit because actually head injuries are something that I do share with people in prison. A lot of people in prison have head injuries. And head injuries are a weird thing. They can change how your personality is. They can change lots of things about you, but often you do not know them, how they're going to do that.
Following on from his motorcycle injury, David followed his girlfriend down to Brighton for a new start away from dispatch riding. Whilst the effects from his concussion were still bothering him, the bohemian surroundings gave him fresh impetus, and he embarked upon a city and guilds to become a teacher. The only sticking point was when it came to the daunting task of delivering a presentation.
I appeared confident, but I wasn't that confident, really. So when I did the teach training, and it's literally only 8 people. 8 people. You have to do a 2-minute presentation. So I had my presentation prepared, but no lie, as I was going around, I was planning how to fake a heart attack to get out.
Really?
I wasn't. I just knew I couldn't do this.
So it gripped you that much?
Yeah. The idea of standing up. 1, I think partly I've never done it before. 2, all my horror of going in from school or come to the front and read. I love reading. I hate reading out loud. It's asking for trouble. So I know I got a fake heart attack. I think, pain down the left side, collapse. It'll be fine. you won't have to
It's
ever
like a
come back
Basil
again.
Fawlty moment of just
Yeah,
trying to
you
do
won't,
anything
you
to
won't
avoid
have,
it.
you won't have to ever come back again. And it got to me, some part of me went, just do it, just do it.
Right.
So I get up, I did a presentation about nanorobots, because I've been reading about nanorobots for some book review that I was doing with the magazine. I did it, and I was terrified all the way through, but actually nobody seemed to know I was terrified. That was the first thing I learned.
Right.
Okay, in fact, people liked it. Okay, it wasn't brilliant, but people were okay. But you had to do like 2 weeks of teaching to get the final qualification, or so many days, and you'd have to go into a college with young people in and teach them something, I'm not gonna, So my secret for doing this was, when I do my presentations and get people to do so, always sit on the table.
Right.
Because I realised if I stand, my knees would literally bang together.
okay.
I was so nervous.
So that's just a coping mechanism to get
Yeah.
through. Yeah.
But it pays off because you look immensely relaxed.
Yes.
My teacher came in. My teacher came in. Dave, you look really relaxed. Didn't know I could not stand up. I
Right.
had to sit on the table. It looks very relaxed, but it's because I can't actually get up.
They didn't know that.
They didn't. Nobody knew. And you realise nobody knows what's in your head. But my brain is not doing great in that I have a memory problem. Memory is not great, and I'm finding life a bit tougher. Essentially, I'm having a bit of mental health. I'm having a breakdown, and I
Right.
think it probably is from the blow to the head. So I glide through the next couple of years, but breakdowns are eventually you have to come out of them. And I carry on working throughout this time, and I would do lectures at art colleges, because art students need to write an essay. So all my job was to get people who do not want to write an essay to write an essay.
Right.
That was my job. So I just chose topics that people were really interested in. I would get them to write essays on tattoos and tattooing,
Okay.
and I would teach them the history of tattooing, or I'd lecture on the history of tattooing. I would look at body piercing and body modifications. I would look at the history of horror novels. I would look at the cultural aspects of death in different countries.
Right.
I had queues of people trying to get in my classes. They had to write an essay at the end of it, but they were interested. My problem was I couldn't remember. I did my lecture and it was just out of my head again.
Right.
So I had to learn the lecture every single week to get it again. My brain was still just not quite functioning properly. But it got me into that ability of engaging people. And from that point on, my whole life has been about engaging people. Yes, I do it through reading and books and stuff, but really, it's drawing people in, So I was sort of like, I had found my way through, the mental health, but I'd learned that what actually matters is engaging people. And actually, I got quite good at that.
Right.
And I learned that actually a lot of that is about being open and vulnerable yourself. And admitting things about yourself. So I know loads of people in prison who go through mental health issues far worse than anything I've ever been through. But I can also say, yeah, I heard voices. I've heard voices in my head. I wasn't sure where they were coming from. I've listened to that. I've thought of the complete nonsense that I thought was true, and worked my way through it, So I can kind of find places with most people where I am not judging people. I am walking alongside them going, yeah, I haven't been quite the same place you have, but it looked quite similar from here.
How much of your so you described childhood, but mainly school being you didn't like school and you weren't engaged. Was any of that experience feeding back into this when you were having the opportunity to help people essentially?
I don't know. I think that instinctively I have a personality that likes to share stuff.
Right.
Okay. I was the kid who'd swap comics. And when kids didn't have comics, I'd say, oh, read mine. I also really liked parties. But what I liked was throwing parties.
Right.
I loved getting people into a party, having the control of the music, the vibe. I loved that, So I knew that I liked making people feel welcome and included on my terms to a certain extent.
Yeah.
On my terms. So there's those things going on. But while I'm in Brighton, and basically I am working for the magazine, I am doing a bit of teaching that was paid, and I'm washing dishes in the Indian restaurant throughout the summer because otherwise I have to sign on.
Right.
Okay. So because there's no teaching over the summer that I get paid. So I wash dishes. Perfectly fine. And then a job comes up, and it's kind of a proper job. It's a part-time job with West Sussex Libraries. And the job is an 18-month job, 2.5 days a week, to engage socially disadvantaged young people across the whole of Sussex in reading. Okay? So you'll find 24 different socially excluded groups of young people.
Right.
And you will organise two events with 24 different artists, writers. I go to the interview. I get the job because I read a lot, which makes sense.
Yeah.
But also, I didn't read the books that they thought I should. I read widely.
Yeah.
I can find somewhere that, I read an awful lot. I still read probably 10 books a month. I read an awful lot. So there's always something, if somebody's saying, I just read books about drugs and cartels, I've read those books as well. Somebody else is reading children's books, I've read children's books.
Yeah.
So I get this job, I say to them, right, this is great. Okay, where are these 24 different groups of socially excluded young people? I said, we've got no idea, David. That's why we're employing you.
Right.
I said, the advantage was, pre-internet, we had phone books, paper ones. And if you went to social services, it listed every kind of group that they worked with and their phone numbers. There's no privacy at all. So the school for visually impaired kids, the school for kids with who were deaf, the secure unit, which holds kids who either committed offences or have had offences committed against them, the unemployment centre, all different forms of groups and charities, Mosaic, who were black heritage and mixed heritage families in Brighton, because there was not much diversity in Brighton at that time. And all of a sudden, I think, I've got to start. I've got a dozen here. And that was my introduction to working with disenfranchised young people.
Right.
And I thought for the first few years, I'm working mainly with looked after children, kids either in foster care or in these what they would call homes, and they would house between 4 to 8 kids with a load of adults in there. They were chaos. Not always very nice places, sometimes very nice places, but chaos. But also prison, because prison is also socially disadvantaged people. And at the time, Lewes Prison outside Brighton was young offenders. So I went there, organised a couple of events. But I didn't really think of prison as being any more my path as anywhere else. But I'm still mainly freelance. I have a 2.5 day a week job project, and they renew my contract. I get another year's extension, but I'm still doing lots of different things.
Yeah.
And then I did some project work. Looked after children. People said, have you thought about doing some work with kids in prison? I said, well, I've done a little bit. I said, well, we'll give you some money if you do this project, So I started doing I worked in Reading Prison with a comic book artist who became a friend of mine, and some poets. We did some work with kids who were, having a very bad time in Reading Jail. I worked with Reading Museum, and then somebody else said, well, that was really good, though. Can you work with the prison over here? So I started getting more and more work with prison, but I still doing lots of other things as well. But I stopped working with kids in care because a lot of them ended up in prison anyway, and also it was problematic to work with because I go to the home to talk about books and there'd be nobody there. They'd all run off. Go to a prison, they're all there.
Right.
They're not run off. It's got its advantages. Difficult environment, but it's got some advantages if you actually want to engage people.
Yeah.
At least I can go and bang on their doors and talk through the door or whatever.
They can't escape.
Not most of the time, although it's surprising that people aren't always where you think they are. They haven't got over the wall, but they may well be a different block than they should be in. Okay. So prison's a complicated world. But so I did lots of other work. I worked, trying to encourage adults in workplaces to read. I did a lot of work with unions. But more and more, people bringing me in to work with the most difficult groups, which they would see as, substance abusers, rough sleepers, and people in prison. And I thoroughly enjoyed working with all of them.
Right.
But we got good work out of people, and they were engaged, they were funny. Because people who do those substances, they function, they do them for different reasons. And one of the projects we did was called the museum. I think we called it the Museum of Me. I got a mock-up layout of a museum. I said, right, what would you put in the Museum of You? What should be in? Museum about you. The whole museum's going to be about you. What should you put in it? We had great fun. I said, right, let's put this room, everything you love, and this room we're going to have a statue of the person in your life you've hated.
Right.
Okay. So I thought, this is like kind of like a warm. I thought we'd all do this.
Yeah.
There's about 15 of us around the table, and we all wrote the person that we hated. Mm-hmm. Okay. And we went round the room. And every single one of the people that we hated was a teacher.
Really?
Now, it's an individual teacher, and people would also say they had wonderful teachers as well. But people's memory of being humiliated, bullied, and probably those teachers had long forgotten all of us. And it'd be one incident generally, rather than a continual tyranny. One incident that stuck in that person's mind and they'd never been able to shift it. In the same way, in an event a few years ago, I had the footballer Tony Adams in to talk to the men. Tony Adams played for England,
And he had substance abuse, I think.
He had alcohol and did prison time.
Yeah.
And he said, though, the thing was, he was terrified of reading out in class. And that fear, he lost that fear playing football, and he lost the fear of doing badly in football through alcohol. All of it is about running away from things. All of it. And part of my work is with both the people that I work with and myself, is looking at our greatest fears and going, they're not that bad, are they? We all have fears, and they're huge in our heads. When we write them down, they're quite small, most of them. Now, people have had horrible things happen to them. That's horrible, But our fears, they're huge and shapeless. And once we put them down in little stories, we get more control of them. We might not get rid of them, but we get more control of them, I think. And part of the reason why I'm so keen on writing is, look, I ask you to write 100 words. That 100 words, we will finish it in 15, 20 minutes. It may not be a work of genius. Sometimes it is. But you will finish it. We will read it out. And generally, they're pretty damn good. Because why it is 100 words, and it's 100 words exactly, is it takes away all the stuff you throw into writing to hide behind. All the adjectives and adverbs, because you're not quite sure what you're saying. And you don't want to say it directly. In 100 words, you have to say it directly. There's nowhere to hide.
Yeah.
You have to be quite brave. And it produces some very good writing. So I've done lots of projects, and they sort of congeal or, into this kind of career where I work with prisons, I organise events, festivals, joined up events, projects that engage people in reading, writing, art, or come to an event. The event yesterday was with Tubby Bamtefa, who's an actor. He's a major star. He's in the TV show Mayor of Kingstown. He's playing an American drug dealing gang leader, but he's from North London. He's not a gang leader. He's not a drug dealer. And that idea of how do you create authenticity?
Yeah.
How do you make people believe? Again, it's about engagement.
Yeah.
Actors are great at that.
Yeah.
And drama, everybody should do a bit of drama. And it really is healthy for all of us. Gets us out of our comfort zone. That's a rubbish phrase, but it's true. But more importantly, it makes us feel better in ourselves, I think, because you're no longer hiding. Most of us are hiding.
Yeah.
Behind suits, behind job titles, behind responsibilities. A lot of my work is about saying, well, let's just drop all that. And that is how you engage people.
You talk about fear that people have. Fear, anxiety, worry over things. Do you think that's typically getting worse, or do you think it's getting better?
I think young people are suffering more from it, but I don't know the reason why. But I definitely think that is true. I don't believe young people are somehow deficient or anything like that. I don't know why. I think we are living in... Maybe it's because in times of great change, and I think we are living in a time of change, everything's up for grabs and nobody really feels very certain. I mean, one thing about your videos I think is important is that my job did not exist when I was at school. And pretty much I've made my job up. I have created my own job. And also, I'd like to have been, to do with books, right? Okay. Now, when I'm young, all I can think of is writer, librarian, shopkeeper, maybe, bookkeeper, bookshop. That's it. And what I think is find a way into the industry that you like. And there's loads of jobs. I mean, the industry is full of jobs you never even know of. Like the film industry, there are people whose job it is just to find the place to shoot the movie. What a great job. Yeah. I mean, just driving around going, yeah, we're going to shoot it there. That is your only job. Fantastic, Somebody else chooses the cast. Yeah. You'll be right for this job. You will be. Completely nebulous skills that you kind of have to learn. People are ready to teach. But so many jobs in the film industry, in the creative industries as a whole, that, don't think there's only one way in. I do think that is part of why there's greater worry put upon young people, because they are far more aware of the possibilities. I was saved by ignorance. Right. Don't knock ignorance completely. I did not know what the wider world was. I didn't know anybody who, basically, everybody I knew, they were either, my family were all farmers, everybody else worked in some kind of light industry, or the very few want to be musicians and rock stars. Right. Yeah, okay. That was it. That was the only possibilities, And it's a long time before I actually realised, there are others. There is other stuff, David. And it was because if you don't meet...
So you didn't worry about it because you hadn't sort of conceived that as, which is interesting. Whereas now, perhaps...
Yeah,
because
I do think young people... you're expected to be out there scouting, looking. Look, the internet's got like 1 million jobs on there. Why haven't you got one? I was saved from that. One, there were no jobs. It was a recession. And I didn't... No, you just took whatever you could get. Plus, a job was only a job, not a career. It was just to finance my weekend, really pleasure. That was my only reason I worked, was so I could have my weekend. Yeah. I bought my weekend by my trading my time for work. That seemed the rule. I didn't know anybody did anything different. I didn't know any teachers or people, other things. And then I was lucky, so lucky, that the world opened up, that world, at a time when I could cope with it. Because I was already thinking, oh yeah, I've done lots of rubbish jobs. I can do other things now. I've got my degree. I can do these things. I don't think it would have been as easy for me to function if that world of possibilities had been there from the start.
Yeah.
Because it'd be just too much.
Yeah, yeah.
It's a lot of pressure. And it's like, oh my
Paradox
God.
of choice, almost.
Oh, definitely that.
yeah.
And also, it feels tantalisingly close within your grasp.
Yeah.
But it's mainly a lie, because most of those jobs actually don't exist that are on the internet. They've all gone, but they're still hanging around there.
Yeah.
And actually, it's very, very difficult at the moment, I think, for people. But take your point, I think, and I do think there's an argument about, do what you like to do. That's kind of common sense. Try to avoid things you don't like. It'll just make you miserable.
Yeah.
Don't let anybody try and do things you don't like doing. You'll just be miserable.
Yeah.
Do things that are difficult and you don't necessarily enjoy, but you can see you can learn something from. Yeah, okay. Everybody needs to do an apprenticeship. I think there's too much for young people expected to jump straight from A to the top. We all still grew up knowing that, if you wanted to be a rock star or whatever, you were going to have to play a lot of rubbish pubs beforehand.
Yeah.
And 99% of people don't get beyond that.
Yeah.
Whereas like now, everybody thinks, I just need one good video and I'm away. That's not true. There is people, it happened, but that's just luck. And, like most of us don't win the lottery, most of us have to put in the time to get somewhere.
Yeah.
I'm thoroughly enjoying my work. I love my work. Absolutely love my work. I am very lucky that I'll bounce out of bed, and I'm straight up for it. I love it, and I'm not a total workaholic. I like time off. But I'm all the time thinking, because it's like, if you've got something you really like, you're all the time thinking, how can I tweak it, improve it, do things? That's my kind of creative mind.
I mean, are you somebody who looks too far in the future, or are you kind of...
Well, at my age, you got to look. You got to look, because, how long do I want to be bouncing into prisons with people that are half my age, twice or three times my size? Vastly intimidating, going like, try and read a book, so it's an energy thing, and how, that said, never somebody, when I first working with, looked after children, so I am early 30s, I'm pierced and I've got very long hair and whatever, and I'd go into these homes and I'd take a lot of books in, and the kids would cluster around me. And the key workers would get quite cross and say, well, they listen to you, David, because, you're... I think they would say, oh, you look the part, Well,
you're interesting, yeah.
Yeah. And I say, you have to be joking, because I am twice their age. If you're 13, 14 and somebody's 20, they're already ancient. They're just old, Now, the good thing about enthusiasm is it jumps over age. And I proved it by I had a colleague who was a librarian, and she looked exactly like a librarian should do.
Right.
She was a large lady with glasses, the dullest haircut you've ever seen. She would also go into the home and talk about books, and they loved her too, because she also had great enthusiasm and listened to people. It wasn't about age. So how you treat people with respect and you listen to them, So in some ways, I'm not so worried about age. I feel a bit better because I spent the last couple of years working with young black and mixed heritage guys in London, talking about reading, and they haven't either bundled me up into a small ball and thrown me onto the netting, or dismissed me, and we have a good laugh and we get on all right together. And that gave me a lot of confidence. I wasn't sure that they were going to listen to some old white guy, really.
Well, it's a good sign, yeah.
Well, I kind of think humans are better than we think we are. We can see through those masks and facades. So once I kind of passed the tests, what you set people, it was good. It was all fine. So I do think, there's a point though where you have to think, humans do not live forever. I am 58. I never thought I'd live 58. I mean, when you're like 16, I mean, you're already writing yourself off at 30.
Yeah.
I didn't get into my stride till I was 40.
Right.
Really. And I've thoroughly enjoyed my 50s. Brilliant. And I'm probably a bit healthier now.
I mean, that is quite some journey that you've been on there. I'm just wondering, I mean, if you could speak to your childhood self, your teenage self, is there any advice that you would give based on your experiences now? I mean, you talked, for example, about almost that amount of ignorance shielding you away from those expectations, which perhaps was a good thing retrospectively. Would there be any advice that you would give yourself looking back?
I had the life that I think I'm very lucky that without ever planning this, just kind of following what is interesting and also following other people's advice or where they were going and listening to other people, I've ended up in the space that I love more than anything. So I would hate to, there's nothing I would change. Even the bad things, I wouldn't change anything. I fear I wouldn't end up here. Advice though, I mean, I wouldn't have listened anyway. If I'm honest, I wouldn't have listened.
But you are an engaging guy now. Your work in prisons.
But I can remember not being. That's the big thing.
Right.
The great thing about learning stuff as an adult is you can still remember the idiot you were. I've never forgotten that. I've not forgotten how poorly educated I was. I've not forgotten and educated in a lot of different ways. Yes, I could not spell. I did not know how to use commas, but I also didn't know how to deal with other people. That now I am pretty much comfortable with pretty much anybody. I've sat in proximities to people who've done the most horrendous things. People who are very, are known for being very violent, and sat with them. I sat with people who are millionaires, who are very famous. And I've managed them all without making too much of a fool of myself.
Right.
And that's the education that has been most valuable. And that is about knowing yourself, which is very easy to say, but very hard to do. And not being too hard on yourself and pick yourself up a little bit.
Let's imagine, and this is my last question, that we've got somebody here with us who doesn't know what they want to do. They might know what they like.
I have one at home.
Right. Okay. Well, this might be easy, but they, not only do they not know what they want to do, they might know what their interests are and what they like to do, from a subject perspective at school, but there's a sense of pressure because some of their friends, their classmates, maybe even family friends, whatever, they do know.
Yeah.
And as you start to go through the teenage years, you start to pick up on that. What advice would you give them?
I think you have to find a way of shielding yourself from all that pressure. Now, the pressure comes because of you being aware of what everybody else is doing, and everybody else is always showing their good side, and there's intense pressure that you should also be doing something. And I think what is terrifying is the size of that. What I've learned about fear and anxiety, all the things that I've been through, is you need to break it down into small steps. Okay? So, don't worry about the big job, the big career, whatever. That will happen in its own sweet time. What you know is the next tiny step, the tiniest step, which may be, making a list of the things I actually truly like. Not what my mom thinks I should like, or my dad thinks I should like, or my teachers think. What do I truly like? Then trying to Google around, well, what kind of things, what areas of that is that? And then try and volunteer for any kind of role in the industries that you most think you satisfy. You know, film industry, be a runner. You get paid rubbish, if at all, but you'll meet people and you'll see how things work and you'll learn about cameras. Maybe you'll be a cameraman, you know. Any kind of thing where you can get an insight, get into the room and see, because that's when you see behind the cameras what the world is really like.
Yeah.
But
And whether it's for you.
exactly.
Yeah.
In your bedroom, Google is telling you there's just too much. There's all these possibilities, and you know they're all too much. No, get back to reality. Think, right, what I need to do is I need some work experience, God, whatever you want, but I need to go into a workplace and see what it's really like. If they pay me, fabulous. As a volunteer, I'll do it. Volunteering is good. I like volunteer. I still do quite a bit of voluntary work. I like it because I decide when I leave. If I don't like it, I'm on my bike because nobody's my boss.
Yeah.
Volunteers, you know, they want you. You know, you don't have to, you know, obey silly orders. Do your training, learn what it's like. Volunteering is a really good opportunity to learn about something, use it to get in somewhere. Because a lot of life that I found is, yes, you will have to do the qualification stuff. But most stuff, I think, seems to be about meeting people. You know, and you will never know the person that will have the most effect. I would not have thought at 16 it would be an old Yorkshire plumber that would have a huge effect on me. You know, who knew?
Yeah.
You know, you will never know. But if you do not get out into the so-called real world,
And making those connections.
you
with
will
real
have
people.
to do that. And I do sympathise. I do think it's terrifying. For any of my generation, we had no choice. It was that or your bedroom for the rest of your life. No choice. And we were used to going out to the pub, and you never knew if people were going to be there. That skill has been lost. Everybody knows now if anybody's going to be there. So the resilience is not as strong. So you have to make yourself more confident by facing down your fears. And most of us fear, more than anything, humiliation. That's why school stays with us so long. It's a humiliation. I talk to people who face down guns and knives, but will not read out in class. Because humiliation is a different kind of death. You know, we are crazy beings, really. We have no common sense whatsoever. But facing our fears, my fear was of standing in front of people, you know, and asking them to listen to me.
But you found a way of overcoming that, your
Yeah.
own way.
I don't know, because I realised I'm fascinated by charisma and charm. Because I kind of think some people have it, some people learn it, but I think more people are given that by their audience. I watch a lot of performances. Some people are really good, but the audience isn't interested. Really, the audience allow you to be yourself. They allow you to speak.
Yeah.
And so you have to find a way of engaging with them. And sometimes that will be, for me, it's finding, there's no point in me bullying or throwing, authority at people. They're all bigger than me. They can laugh at me. I have to make them listen to me. Sometimes it takes a while, and eventually I can get them all listening to me. Not for very long sometimes, but then I've got them. And when I've got them for that 10, 15 minutes, it's great because we're a group.
Yeah.
We're listening
Yeah.
together and we're speaking together. It's not 10 conversations. It's one conversation, and we're all taking part.
Fantastic. Well, look, on that note, thank you so much for coming here today, because I mean it's been quite some journey. It's a very interesting story, and it certainly shows. Well, you just don't know where you're going to end up. Many people don't. So just rolling with it and taking on, I suppose, all of those different experiences, wide-ranging experiences that then roll up into where you are now, which is something that you enjoy.
Absolutely.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that. Slightly different episode, not out and about, but more of a conversation. So some really, really a great advice there, and a great story. So stay tuned for another episode soon. I hope you enjoyed it, and thanks for watching.